Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. I'm Reed Cowan. Americans less than 24 hours from Election Day. Presidential candidates, you can see them getting on plane after plane. They're blitzing battleground states that will decide this election. Donald Trump on the stump in North Carolina and then off to Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris also zigzagging the map. She will spend the lion's share of her time there in Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. Harris got some good news from early voting over the weekend from another state. Surprising results from the state of Iowa. Look at this. New polling from the Des Moines Register showing Harris now holding a small lead over Donald Trump in a state that is traditionally deeply red. Now, keep in mind, this poll is still within the margin of error, but it got a lot of press and a lot of fire over the weekend. Our campaign reporter is following Trump and Harris. We'll go live to CBS News' Libby Cathy in North Carolina, where Donald Trump just spoke. But first, Aaron Navarro is in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where Harris appeals to women. Aaron, what's the ground game for Harris there in Allentown for these closing hours?
Just from talking to voters in line, it's been pretty constant. People have been knocking on doors. I talked to one door knocker who noted and introduced me to some people online that noted that the Madison Square Garden event really galvanized Latino voters here in Allentown. Allentown in the country has the 8th largest Puerto Rican population in particular. And from talking to voters in line, Latino voters, I really got the sense that they feel very galvanized after the Madison Square Garden comment. They know people that were going to sit this election out and instead are coming out to vote for Kamala Harris. I also ran into a couple of Republicans saying that while they are unsure if Harris will see the same support among Republicans as Biden did in 2020, she definitely is cutting into Trump's margin there.
Yep, Allentown, the birthplace of all three of my children who have roots in Puerto Rico, Aaron. Okay, so Kamala Harris holding 3 campaign rallies in Pennsylvania today. She's starting off in a portion of the state that has high Latino population there, as well as this revelatory of her ground game.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it could be the margin of her victory here if she does win this state. They have been playing in the rural counties as well. And these rallies that we're going to see tonight is meant to juice up the turnout for people who have not already voted in these big population centers in the western part of the state. We'll see her in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia late tonight, where you have a lot of musical acts coming to bring people in, get them to vote tomorrow. And from talking to people online, I still ran into a lot of people who still have not voted. Yes, early voting is up generally across the country, but a lot of people are waiting to do it in person tomorrow. They want to follow the general tradition of Election Day voting. We'll see how many Democrats turn out.
Well, let's ask about this. Pennsylvania suburbs have voted for Donald Trump in the past. Does the Harris campaign believe they're making any headway where those voters are concerned in the state?
In Pennsylvania, in Michigan, other battleground states, that's been a focus in part because they think that since this is the first election after the Dobbs decision, that white women, college-educated voters will swing to them, will turn out in bigger ways than they have in prior presidential elections. And that is really the basis on why they have some confidence that they are playing in the suburbs of Philly. Bucks County, a traditional bellwether, always competitive. Talking to Democrats there, they are optimistic that the ground game Harris's campaign has had for most of this year will pay off in the next couple of days.
Aaron Navarro, CBS News campaign reporter. My friend, I really have lost count of the number of times that we have spoken live here on CBS News 24/7. You are almost there. Your work has been gold star. Thank you so much. Donald Trump already held his first campaign event of the day. He spoke to voters in Raleigh this morning before flying to Pennsylvania. Trump really zeroing in on immigration and border security once again. Let's listen in.
If they don't stop this onslaught of criminals and drugs coming into our country, I'm going to immediately impose a 25% tariff on everything they send in to the United States of America. And the reason I delayed that is you're the first ones I've told it to. Congratulations, North Carolina. And it's only got a 100% chance of working, because if that doesn't work, I'll make it 50. And if that doesn't work, I'll make it 75 for the tough guys. And I'll make it 100. Then I'll make it 100.
In CBS News, Libby Cathy. Now, Libby, you were on the inside. What else did he cover today to voters?
Yeah, good to be with you, Reed. Trump just finished not too long ago here in Raleigh, North Carolina, speaking behind me and really leaning in, like you said, to immigration and the southern border today, that being his closing message and really being central to this campaign throughout. You heard that soundbite. That was actually a message to Mexico's new president. He's saying that unless she stops the, quote, onslaught of drugs and criminals coming into this country, he will impose a 25% tariff on all goods coming into the United States from Mexico across the board. The crowd seemed to really enjoy that. I will say this crowd was fired up, but it was not full. This arena, this venue fits about 7,000 guests. It is a Monday morning, but not full. There were plenty of empty seats behind the former president and behind the press riser. What does this mean the day before Election Day? We know that Trump held a rally here on 2016, right before the election as well. That seemed to have a little more crowd size, but crowd size does not indicate who will win this election. We know this. Really, we're going to have to wait to see the returns tomorrow to find out what's going on here. But absolutely, the former president leaning into immigration and the southern border, and the crowd really liking it. But here, this was Trump's base represented. The question is, how will this resonate with undecided and Republican voters who may still be on the fence and still haven't headed to the polls yet, Reed?
Yeah, and we know that Donald Trump won that state in 2020. When you talk to voters, do you get a sense that his message, especially on immigration, talking about that, tariffs, deporting millions of people who are in the United States back to Mexico, are you getting the sense it's resonating?
Yes, Reed, talking to voters here. And again, this is Trump's base at this rally, but it's the first thing they bring up is immigration and the wall and them saying that Trump is the only person who can fix it in their views. They also bring up the economy. They say that they were better. Their pocketbooks were better 4 years ago. So absolutely, these messages are resonating with the base. They are often repeating talking lines we hear from the former president organically. They're taking ownership of those lines, really believing it. Now, again, the question is how this resonates with undecided and Republicans who aren't necessarily coming out to his rally on a Monday morning. But voters here absolutely confident that Trump will win North Carolina. This is the only battleground he won in both 2016 and 2020. So the campaign and voters here confident he will take it and telling me they will not accept a Harris victory if she were to win. Some voters here today. Reed.
Well, Donald Trump also reportedly going to Pennsylvania and Michigan today. As you've traveled with the president, and now you sort of know what he says to these places, these states, does his message change state to state? Does he customize his message to the voter blocks he speaks to?
A little bit, and that's what we're going to be listening to today, is if he is tailoring this message at all, staying on message. Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, his co-campaign chairs, wanting him to have a more disciplined message in these final couple days, staying on that teleprompter script. Now, Trump famously says, you know, is it nice to have a president who doesn't stay on teleprompter? So it's really, he changes the message wherever he goes. You really don't know what he's going to say. That's why we're going to be watching those rallies so closely this afternoon in Michigan and Pennsylvania. And we're also looking for special guests that he's bringing out. Today, he had Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Marco Rubio, and we are expecting today and tomorrow him to kind of bring out special guests and to say, you know, you're not just electing me, you're electing this cabinet of officials, and that's something that we've seen him do here in the closing days. And yeah, tailoring his message to those battleground voters, that's who he's trying to get to turn out the vote here with hours to go now, Reed.
I know the sounds behind you, they are what we hear after a church dinner, the folding up of the chairs. You've got a plane to catch. We're going to let you catch that seat. Thank you so much, Libby. So let's jump the map to Georgia now. All eyes are in this battleground state of Georgia. Former President Donald Trump, he'll be there today. Both candidates want those 16 electoral votes that are up for grabs. So far, more than 4 million voters have cast an early ballot in Georgia. In fact, the Secretary of State for Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, took to the podium to congratulate those voters who already made their decision today. Let's listen in.
Here in Georgia, it is easy to vote and hard to cheat. Our systems are secure and our people are ready. Your local election officials will work around the clock tomorrow to ensure everything runs smoothly. If you're one of the 4 million voters who have voted early, congratulations. You have made history, but you've also dispelled Stacey Abrams' false narrative that it's hard to vote here in Georgia. That's 4 million votes, 4 million voters. This is what we have known this entire time. Georgia has short lines, secure elections, 4 million voters voted without issue. And that is something that we can be proud of as Georgians.
Georgia Secretary of State speaking there. So CBS News correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now. Nicole, the Secretary of State says their systems are secure, yet the Trump campaign has filed a lawsuit challenging illegal ballot collection in Georgia. Walk us through what they're arguing here.
Yeah, well, much of that litigation stems from Fulton County, which we're here outside of the Fulton County election hub, that they allowed people to hand deliver their absentee ballots over the weekend after early voting had closed on Friday. And so what Republicans are arguing is that they feel that that is illegal, but a Georgia judge rejected that argument in essence because county buildings can continue to remain open to collect these ballots. That is something that Fulton County election officials reaffirmed here, that this was in compliance with the law. Secretary of State's office has also said that no laws were broken in Fulton County and other counties accepting these absentee ballots over the weekend.
We know that Fulton County officials also just wrapped up a briefing on this and other things. We know a lot of people are wanting to know about what made headlines last week, and that's, of course, that Russian disinformation campaign that mentioned things happening in Georgia. Walk us through how that's affecting voters there.
Yeah, well, I first want to pause and let you know why we were here. I mean, this is, again, as I mentioned, the Fulton County election hub. And what's most notable about being here is this is the result of 2020, you know, where we saw a lot of election fraud claims and misinformation spread. You'll remember there was the counting of ballots during 2020 in State Farm Arena when you had people, for instance, like Rudy Giuliani claiming that ballots were being stuffed into suitcases. Ultimately, obviously, those claims were proven false, and there's litigation surrounding that. But
right.
Just to be clear, we will not see that same type of scenario happen here in 2024. Instead, those ballots will be counted in this center behind me. It's a brand new facility, some $30 million invested in it, and election officials are very confident that not only will tomorrow's election be secure, but that they will be able to tabulate these results very quickly and very easily because of the investments that they have made here. It is a very secure facility. We just did a walkthrough, but that is one of the most notable changes that we will see here in Fulton County on Election Day tomorrow.
Nicole Killian, thank you so much. We appreciate you. To our viewers at home, you can watch those election night results, analysis, and exclusive CBS polling with the CBS News team live from our election headquarters in New York, with our team spread out all across the country. Special coverage starts tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News 24/7. 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on CBS. When we come back, we're going to focus on the balance of power in Congress. Alaska's not a swing state, but swing state money thrown at a very important race. That's a very tight race. We're going to talk to one of the candidates who is hoping to control the balance of power in Congress when we come back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We are watching the high-stakes down-ballot races taking place across the country. Many of them could determine whether Republicans or Democrats take control of Congress. One race happening in Alaska where a fight for the state's only House seat is underway. And Republican congressional candidate Nick Begich, he hopes to unseat incumbent Democratic Congresswoman Mary Peltola. He joins me now in the snow-laden state of Alaska. So Alaska, not a swing state, but swing state level money being thrown at your particular race there. Some reports as high as $40 million, a lot of it outside money. I want to first get your take on whether you think $40 million will help the people of Alaska, or is this money intended to help Republicans at large?
I'll tell you, you're seeing an equal amount of spending on the left and the right in Alaska. I've been outraised in this campaign directly 5-1. So my Democrat opponent has raised over $11 million. We've raised just over $2 million. But the outside spending's been incredible, as you point out, about $13 million on each side of the aisle. And we've never seen anything like that for a House race in our state.
You have been quoted in one of the local newspapers there in Alaska at one point in your candidacy of referring to Social Security as, quote, a Ponzi scheme. We know in a debate you walked that back. Where do you land on Social Security and keeping it?
Social Security is a critical program, and those comments, like so many comments around the nation, taken out of context. The truth of the matter is the government has been treating Social Security quite poorly, and they've been reappropriating the money in the Social Security Trust Fund in order to fund current operating expenditures, and that's wrong. Retirees need to know that they can count on those funds for retirement. Even though Social Security Administration and the Congressional Budget Office have both come out in recent years and said, look, we're not going to have the funds necessary to meet the commitments that we've made to seniors. We've got to fix that program.
If you are elected to Congress, will you join the Freedom Caucus, which has been widely reported, even by Republicans, as being one of the more extreme factions in Congress?
There's so many caucuses in the Congress. You got to look at what is the intent. I'm not an obstructionist. I want to get work done on behalf of the people of my state and behalf of the people of this country. We've got so many problems that need to be solved. And that's my focus if elected, is I'm going down there on behalf of the people of Alaska to open our state up. We've had a major issue with cost of living, not just across the country, but particularly here in my home state. And what I tell folks is, look, if you want to lower the cost of energy, if you want to lower the cost of living in this country, the pathway to American prosperity begins with Alaska.
Donald Trump endorses you, and we know that Donald Trump is fueled by a lot of people who deny the reality of the 2020 election. Do you believe Donald Trump lost the election in 2020?
Look, I think there were a number of irregularities in 2020 that were worth looking at. I think 2024 is a new election cycle, and we're looking forward to the future. I think in 2016, we saw a number of people that had concerns about the election. 2020, we saw the same thing, and that concerns me as an American. Forget the Republican Democrat label. As an American, I want people to know that they have high confidence in our election results. We should all strive for that. That's important. So anything that we can do to enhance election security will enhance the confidence of the American people as we head to the polls and we see the results of those polls here in a couple of days.
With respect, sir, that is not a no standing there in the snow. So you are not willing to answer whether you believe Donald Trump lost the election in 2020.
Well, I think we see that Biden is the president. He's not going to be the president here shortly. He's going to be stepping out of that role. But we've got to look forward, folks. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what's on the ballot, is the future, not the past.
And we also have to thank you for being on today. Your opponent did not accept our invitation to talk to us, so we do appreciate you having the conversation here. Thank you so much for talking to us on CBS News 24/7. Well, from live reports in the field to analysis in our election center to the science of projections, CBS News, we are at the ready. In fact, look at this. This is a look behind the scenes of the high-tech set that CBS News will use to make sure that you, the viewer, have the most up-to-date and accurate information as possible as the vote counts and the exit polling starts to roll in. And CBS News debuting our first ever immersive AR/VR presidential election system. This brings the story to life in a way that really makes history. Of course, Presidential Election Center there. This will be the place where that information will come to you in real time. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell explains just how much goes into covering such a complex story with hundreds of moving parts.
We have reporters in each of those 7 battleground states. In New York at our election headquarters, we've got a team of journalists. We've also got our data desk in order to look closely inside the numbers that are coming in all night long to give people a sense how America decides. We also have at CBS News something that's very different from everybody else. We have something called the Democracy Desk, our investigative team to look at any potential election irregularities.
CBS News live coverage, America Decides, begins Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News 24/7 stream and then 7 p.m. over on CBS. All right, let's ride our video monitors to Dallas and an ominous sky there in Dallas. A lot of voters in the Lone Star State head to polls knowing that they're facing off with the potential for some severe weather, so let's bring in Jess to talk about that.
And it starts in Dallas, but it stretches all the way up into areas like Chicago, too. There's active weather right now widespread throughout the South and the Midwest, and let's dive into it, because as we head into the coming days, we're going to be dealing with some very extreme weather, starting off in areas like Oklahoma, where we've been dealing with tornado threat widespread throughout that state. Currently, we're under tornado watches just in the eastern portions of that state as these storms continue to track that defined line specifically over into states like Arkansas, stretched up into Illinois and into the early morning hours tomorrow. We'll continue to watch the severe weather really unfurl too. Starting off with Futurecast, here's where we're at right now. Snow just into the areas closer to Albuquerque as we speak, up into those high elevations. But here's that distinct line of storms that's going to come into effect into the overnight hours tonight, anywhere from Missouri stretching all the way down into Oklahoma. Mind you, Kansas City's going to get hit with this too. Last week we dealt with 2 major storm systems that swept swept throughout that region, really impacting community members like Kansas City. And this continues to impact millions of Americans, either with just rain in the forecast in southern portions of Texas, more severe weather more north, closer to Missouri, all the way up into Indiana, into our forecasted hours tomorrow night. And we'll continue to keep a close eye on that as it continues to track off into the east. But taking it a step back, today's severe weather outlook shows an enhanced risk in those eastern portions of Oklahoma, specifically where we're under tornado watches right now. And we've seen little tiny pop-up tornado warnings in effect throughout the past 2 hours for this show, and we'll continue to watch that as it continues to track off into the east. Here we go for that tornado threat, a 10% risk just in Oklahoma alone, a 15% risk when it comes to large hail. We'll keep a close eye on this, and as we head into the coming days, this really could impact millions of voters stretched throughout those states as they're gearing up to head to the polls.
All right, let's hope they do so and stay warm and safe. Yes. Well, Israel terminated its decade-old agreement with the main UN agency providing aid to Palestinian refugees. More on that when CBS News 24/7 continues. In the meantime, we'll continue watching our breaking news our monitors for breaking news. I'll get it right next time. Countries around the world keeping a close eye on U.S. presidential elections here, especially Ukraine. As CBS News foreign correspondent Tina Kraus is about to show you, leaders there know the outcome of this presidential race could affect U.S. support in Ukraine's fight against Russia.
In Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv, residents are watching and waiting to see what America decides on Election Day. Our future depends on what happens on November 5th, this man says. The U.S. has supplied Ukraine with over $60 billion in military assistance since Russia invaded in 2022. While Harris has pledged to keep supporting Ukraine's defense, Trump says he won't keep the aid coming and can end the war in 24 hours if he's elected, though he hasn't said how. This Ukrainian says if Harris wins, it will be a continuation of the sham assistance to Ukraine, which means they'll talk and do nothing. If Trump wins, he'll most likely push to end the war and give away a share of Ukraine's territory. In either case, Ukraine loses. American Ahmed Khan will be watching the election results from Ukraine as a human rights advocate supporting the Ukrainian people.
I would just say to the American people and the future American president that they should really need to spend more time understanding who the people of Ukraine are, what the people of Ukraine are fighting for.
Are you reloaded?
Ukrainian forces are losing ground in eastern Ukraine faster than they have in years. Russia now occupies about 20% of their country. Tina Kraus, CBS News, London.
Thank you. Our video monitors right now take us to this, and you see in the night sky what we're looking at, the Middle East, where Israel terminated its decades-old agreement with the main UN agency providing aid to Palestinian refugees. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams reports on Israel severing their ties, plus the latest on a military raid.
Israel's military says it carried out a nighttime raid inside Syria and detained a Syrian citizen who it accuses of working for Iran and gathering intelligence on Israeli troops. That comes amid fears that Iran could again target Israel with missiles following Israel's strikes on Iran last month, hitting military installations. For years, Iran and Israel have been fighting a so-called shadow war, Iran backing armed proxies in this region and Israel carrying out covert attacks. But in recent months, that shadow war has come into the open, with Iran and Israel directly attacking each other. Meanwhile, Israel's government says it has terminated a decades-old agreement with the United Nations agency that helps Palestinian refugees. That follows new Israeli laws passed last week, which will bar the UN agency known as UNRWA from operating inside this country. Israel is a long-time critic of UNRWA and alleges that it's been infiltrated by Hamas in Gaza. UNRWA has dismissed several staff members accused of taking part in the October 7th attacks. For context, UNRWA says it employs about 13,000 people in Gaza and says it is the backbone of humanitarian assistance in the Gaza Strip. The U.S. has said it is, quote, deeply concerned by the Israeli legislation. Back to you.
Our video monitors now take us to a Pennsylvania courtroom for a hearing regarding ex-CEO Elon Musk's $1 million giveaways to registered voters in swing states. Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner alleging in a lawsuit Musk's America PAC, which aims to boost former President Donald Trump's campaign, violates the state's lottery law by offering huge amounts of money. You can see it right there. On Friday, the judge overseeing that case rejected Musk's request to move the case to federal court.
Let me be clear about one thing. No district attorney, no prosecutor, I don't care how powerful they are, can take away the First Amendment freedoms that are the bedrock of this nation. We don't back down from bullies.
Krasner says his work is to protect both the integrity of the election and of lotteries. A health scare for Alabama Governor Kay Ivey while campaigning for congressional candidate Caroline Dobson. Ivey, seen there on the left, started to shake in front of a crowd. You can see there, she's looking pretty worse for the wear. Well, paramedics rushed there. They treated her for dehydration, and she is reportedly doing much better now. We've got some breaking news from the state of Ohio. A jury delivered a verdict in the trial against former police officer Adam Coy. That's the guy who stands accused of murder and reckless homicide for fatally shooting Andre Hill in 2020. Coy told jurors he thought Hill was holding a silver revolver, but later found out it was just a set of keys and not a gun. Let's listen into what happened.
As to count one, we, the jury, being duly empowered and sworn, do find the defendant Adam Coy guilty of murder as he stands charged in count one of the indictment, signed this 4th day of November 2024, and what appeared to be 12 signatures. Second count, we, the jury, being duly empowered and sworn, do find the defendant Adam Coy guilty of felonious assault as he stands charged in count 2 of the indictment, signed this day, and what appeared to be 12 signatures. The next verdict form. We, the jury, being duly empowered and sworn, do find the defendant Adam Coy guilty of reckless homicide as he stands charged in count 3 of the indictment and what appear to be 12 signatures. Does anyone wish the jurors to be polled?
No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
You heard the reaction there from the courtroom. Coy now faces at least 15 years in prison. When we come back, we're talking the Carolinas. Voters going to the polls in record numbers there as well, and CBS News 24/7. We'll go back to reporters and the information we have from that very crucial state. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. So get ready to hear this a lot today. We are in the final stretch of election season. In the presidential election, candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they're making closing arguments to these folks, people who are in line to vote. In fact, more than 78 million Americans have already cast their ballots during early voting. Millions more will vote today and tomorrow. So let's look at where we are. This is still anybody's race. The latest CBS News poll shows razor-thin margins in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Same situation in Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. These states will likely be the states to decide the results of the presidential election. So joining us now for a preview of what to look for on Tuesday is CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto.
Hey, everybody. Anthony Salvanto here at the CBS News Data Desk with a look at how to watch election night here on CBS on Tuesday. Let me start with our up-to-date latest estimates from all the battleground states. That's the 7 tight states that you'll see here in white that will likely decide this in the Electoral College. And our CBS estimates, one after another, they're all close. They're all within the margin of error. You see, including across the upper Midwest there, Pennsylvania, dead even. That could be key. That's your map. Now, let me show you how to watch this as the results start to come in. CBS News will have exit polls from all the battleground states, sending interviewers to precincts as people are voting on Election Day. We will bring you that data as soon as the polls close. We will show you the estimates we have from each state in real time. As county votes start to report, We will first urge patience. I will remind folks that in 2020, here's an example from Georgia. When we got all the vote, it was a narrow Joe Biden victory. But if you had seen that at, let's say, 8 p.m., just an hour after poll close, it would have looked like this, where only a few counties had reported, many of them Republican leaning. Have to wait for all the vote to come in a lot of close races. Now, as we go forward, I'm going to remind folks, one thing we always look for at the decision desk is the patterns and the shifts, comparing this election to the last one. For example, if in 2020 I had shown you this, it would have shown you that Joe Biden at the time, these blue arrows moving to the left, was swinging a lot of those counties around metro Atlanta. Donald Trump at the time was swinging a lot of these rural counties down in the central part of the state. We will show you how the shift is playing out in real time in this election, too. And the other thing I'll remind folks is where the votes come from and turnout. Sometimes on just a red and blue map, you can't see that. But if I turn the state on its side here, these higher bars are where you've got more voters. In metro Atlanta, this story is Democrats need a lot of turnout, whereas across the rural areas, fewer votes in each county, but Republicans tend to run up a rather consistent margin. That will be key for Donald Trump. So that's some of the ways that we will bring you all of this in real time as we go forward on election night. See you then.
All right, Anthony, thank you so much. So let's look at North Carolina and the push for voters there. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry live from Raleigh. Skylar, you caught up with Democratic Party Chair Anderson Clayton. He's the youngest person ever to win that party in the state. What did you learn?
Yeah, Reed, good to see you as always. It was an interesting conversation. We actually canvassed alongside her and other party volunteers that were looking to get the word out about why they should choose Democrats up and down the ballot, not just on the presidential level, but other hotly contested state races here, including the gubernatorial race. What she had to say was pretty interesting. They are going after some of those unregistered voters, especially those who may be focused on single issues, the economy, reproductive rights, immigration, those who say that they may be pro-abortion rights or against abortion rights. They want to have those conversations with people and try to sway them to vote for Democrats, framing this as a pro-abortion rights sort of thing as it relates to Vice President Harris versus what we see with former President Donald Trump. Here's one of the bits of the conversation that I had with her. Take a listen.
I honestly liked what people were saying this past weekend of, Kamala Harris is the only president who actually protects your right to disagree with her. And a lot of that message is what we're using, especially with unaffiliateds right now, Republicans on the doors that we're talking to, because this is fully a turnout game. And we know that it is going to be whoever can help get the most people out to the polls. But it also has to be through some of these persuasion conversations that we're still having with undecided voters, honestly, even now.
And so an interesting POV there when you take into consideration that we are at this stage of this election cycle. One of the other things that you pay attention to, Reed, when you zoom out altogether, the number of early votes that have already been tabulated here in the Tar Heel State, more than 4.5 million. That is shattering any sort of record that we have seen in the past. And in case you were wondering, that also includes the western part of North Carolina, which was pretty hard hit following Hurricane Helene. After hearing from the Board of Elections, they say that they are moving on without a hitch thus far in terms of counting of the ballots up until this point. We also know that polls will be open early tomorrow, especially in that part of the state. They say that there are some tents that have had to be set up because of the damaged precincts following the storm, but they are now going to be okay. Now, back to that conversation that I had with Anderson Clayton. She also pointed out some other issues that she felt will be incredibly important, but also talked about why she feels as this race in particular will be incredibly important as far as young people turning out to the polls. Take a listen.
We've just got so many young people that have put their hearts and souls into it this year, but they're also scrappy and they were hungry and they wanted to make sure that North Carolina was a state that they could stay in. And I feel like that is something that is pushing a lot of us out this year, is because we don't want to have to leave it. And so many people that I have heard and that I've talked to have been like, if things don't change here, that's what we're going to have to do. And I'm like, no, it deserves to be a state that everybody can stay.
Back to the presidential race, obviously a razor-thin contest here in North Carolina. It's interesting given the fact that a Republican presidential candidate has carried the state since 2012. Former President Trump actually had 4 rallies here since Saturday, including one this morning here in Raleigh. Something else to point out, Reed, is given the fact that this is the only battleground state of the 7 that former President Trump won in 2020. Interesting to pay attention to see how the Trump campaign decides to move forward in these last 24 hours or so to go before this thing all wraps up. The Harris-Walz ticket feels as if it's very much in play. Obviously, in the big Democratic parts or the blue parts of the state, that's Charlotte, that's here in the research corridor, which they call Raleigh-Durham because of the amount of universities and colleges in this area, and also in the western part of the state as well. And so this will be very much a toss-up until the very end. I think it'll be interesting to see once polls close.
Skylar Henry, thank you so much for that peek into what's going on in North Carolina. Literally door-to-door work being done there until the 11th hour. While Harris and Trump wrap up their races, their running mates also running out the clock. Vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz both began their day in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Senator Vance is speaking in Michigan right now. Then he heads to Georgia and Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Governor Tim Walz stays in Wisconsin for a 3-city tour and will end in Michigan. He spoke moments ago at a Get Out the Vote event. Let's listen into what he had to say.
I would ask you in this moment to think of the women in your life that you love. Daughters, wives, moms, aunts, uncles, sisters, whoever it is. Think about those women. Think about them. Those people, those women, this election is truly about their lives are at stake. We're seeing it across the country. Maternal mortality rates in states like Texas have shot through the roof. A story comes out every single day because of Donald Trump's abortion ban that put 20 states under this ban. Our daughters now, those people you're thinking of, those loved ones that are in your minds right now, they have fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers had. They are more at risk than they've ever been. But here's the good news. When we get that Senate, we get that House, we elect Kamala Harris, they will send over the restoration of Roe, making reproductive rights enshrined into law, and President Harris will sign it.
So arguably, you could say that Democrats making strong arguments for your daughters, meanwhile, Republicans making arguments for your dollars. J.D. Vance is in Michigan speaking to voters there. Let's see if there's a difference in tone and approach.
So reject the example of Kamala Harris. Reject somebody who wants to call us racist for believing that we should have a border. Reject calling our fellow citizens garbage because we think that Kamala Harris is doing a bad job. Because here's our simple message to Kamala Harris. No, our fellow citizens are not garbage for thinking that you're doing a terrible job. But tomorrow the state of Michigan is going to take out the trash in Washington, D.C.
J.D. Vance speaking there to voters. Be sure to stay with CBS News for exit polling. We also will have real-time results. All of the analysis that we promised you a moment ago all day from all over the country, especially in those swing states, the battleground states that will likely decide this election. Special coverage starts at 4 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the life and legacy of a music icon. Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, and one of the first at that to achieve that great achievement. Quincy Jones, gone from our earth at the age of 91. The man who wrote We Are the World. We'll be right back. New developments from a tragic mass shooting on Halloween night that killed 2 and injured 8 in Orlando, Florida. The state attorney for Orange and Osceola counties, Andrew Bain, says the teen suspect is going to be charged as an adult. This morning, he explained his decision in a news conference.
Orlando Police Department estimated nearly 75,000 people were downtown in the night of the shooting. That's 75,000 people running for their lives that night. To shoot into a massive crowd like that, shows a truly disregard for life. And the only recourse is to charge this defendant as an adult because it fits the egregious nature of the crime. What's particularly concerning about these new charges is how someone felt embodied to shoot people at point-blank range in public. And underscores a critical issue that goes beyond the specific facts of this case. And is a broader issue that is keeping guns and access to them out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them, especially our youth.
Well, the suspect's charges 2 counts of second-degree murder with a firearm. To Oklahoma now, where a pair of tornadoes left a trail of destruction in many parts of the state. Listen to the buzzsaw there. That's what cleanup sounds and looks like, folks. Video to our monitor shows downed trees and homes damaged in a community just outside of Oklahoma City. Governor there of that state declaring a state of emergency with more severe weather expected today. So what we talked about in Dallas, you were right, Jess, that severe weather just starts there and moves on up.
It's a whole line of severe storms.
Right.
You'll see it in just a second when I pull it up. But Oklahoma is under tornado watches right now, and they're gearing up for very active weather as we gear up for the evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow, just in time for Election Day. So let's dive into it because it's not just Oklahoma and Texas. However, we have been keeping a very close eye on them. Here's what's happening. And today, the evening hours tonight, this major storm system, this really strong frontal system, anywhere from Chicago stretched down into Texas, Corpus Christi included. We're going to continue to watch it track off into the east into the overnight hours tonight, bringing with it some severe weather, a chance of tornadoes widespread throughout that region. And to add to that, we'll also potentially see some hail associated with those thunderstorms too. Here we go into Futurecast, advancing the clock into the evening hours tonight. Now we have snow on the back end in areas closer to the high elevations up near New Mexico. But what I really want to pay attention to is as the storm system starts to strengthen and move to the east, it can create a lot of issues, especially as we head into Election Day just tomorrow morning. This is into the 9 a.m. hours Central Time, all the way down into Texas, stretching up into Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, everywhere in between. We're going to continue to watch heavy storms fall throughout those communities into the evening hours tomorrow night. This is very similar to the last 2 storms we had last week, especially in areas like Kansas City, that's also going to get hit with this system. That enhanced risk stretches widespread throughout areas like eastern Oklahoma, all the way up into northern portions of Arkansas too. And as we change gears all the way into our tornado threat, it's the exact same areas that we're going to continue to keep a close eye on. We've seen tornado activity already. We'll continue to see more into the evening hours tonight. Hail is another big concern for those community members too, Reed.
All right, well, speaking of community members, we have a large gathering them in Scranton, Pennsylvania to watch and hear. Why? They're all listening to presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Let's listen in for a moment.
Always and always have stood with labor. And so I'm very proud to stand with you, Glenn, with your members, with all the members of labor as we do this together. And as he pointed out, there's a huge difference between me and the other guy, which everybody here knows, which is why you are here to help us get out the vote. But I thought I would share with you. So when I was coming in, someone reminded me of a story I've shared, which is when I first ran for office as DA. So I started out at 6 points in the polls, right? So for everyone who knows, that's 6 out of 100. No one thought we could win. And I used to campaign with my ironing board. Okay, you are wondering now, what is she talking about? So I would grab my ironing board, a roll of duct tape, my posters and my flyers, and I put them all in my car, and I drive to the local grocery stores, and I'd pull out my ironing board and my duct tape and my posters and my flyers, and I'd walk to the front of the grocery store outside, and I'd stand up my ironing board because you see an ironing board makes a really great standing desk. And I'd use the duct tape to tape my posters on the outside of the thing, and I'd put my flyers on top of the ironing board, and I would require people to talk to me as they walked in and out of the grocery store. And I will tell you, that is how I love to campaign. I don't do it as much anymore, obviously. But what you all are signing up to do today and what you've been doing, let's enjoy it. And I know you do. I can feel the mood in here because it's the best of who we are as a democracy. And I think we've kind of, right? And that's what our campaign has been about. We are a people-driven campaign. And we love the people. And we see in the face of a stranger a neighbor, right? And that's the spirit of what we are doing. And over these last, this whole era of this other guy, what it's done with all that talk that's been about trying to have us point fingers at each other and divide each other, it makes people feel alone. It makes them feel like there's nobody standing with them. And so the way I've always been thinking about our campaign in these next 24 hours is, as we are getting out the vote, as we are canvassing, let's be intentional about building community, about building coalitions, about reminding people we all have so much more in common than what separates us. There is power in that. There is power in that. And there's lasting power in that, right? It's about the win, and it is about more. It is about more. It is about just strengthening our country and reminding each other we are all in this together. We rise and fall together. And that is the strength of who we are and everyone here. That's the strength of Bob Casey. We got to get him back in the United States Senate. That's the strength of Mayor Cognetti and all that she has been doing, right? It's about leadership that is the kind of leadership that we want, right? They are leaders. We are leaders who understand that the measure of our strength is not based on who we beat down. It's based on who we lift up, right?